Welcome back to another video, and in this video we're going to be starting on a brand new series on the channel, and that series is going to be about core data. Now, this video in particular is just going to be kind of an introductory video to core data and some of its fundamental concepts. So let's go ahead and get started by talking about what exactly core data even is in the first place. So core data is a framework built by Apple that allows us to persist data on device or in the cloud. Now, in order to store data in the cloud with core data, you also have to use CloudKit. But we are not going to be using CloudKit in this series. We're only going to be using core data because CloudKit is something all on its own, and that would warrant an entire series on its own. But I'm not going to do a series on CloudKit. So if you're looking for a series on CloudKit, this isn't it. All right. So with that being said, the persistence on device can be utilized in a few different ways. You can use it for, just all of your app data, and you could also use it for caching, or you could use it for both if you need to. So let's say, for example, you are running a network request and you need to cache a network response to avoid making the same network request over and over and over again. You can do that with core data. All you have to do is have a data model and have your core data stack set up, and then save that data from the network request in core data to cache it, and then you can retrieve it as needed and then refresh it again as necessary, right? So that is caching. Now, you could also, again, use core data for just your persistent storage generally. So think reminders or notes or something similar, where you store all of your reminders, your calendar events, your notes, stuff like that on device. That's where core data comes into play. Now, of course, things like reminders, notes, and calendar also have integration with iCloud and CloudKit, where you can share all that stuff across all of your devices. But if you don't have iCloud turned on, for example, it'll just use normal core data code, and it won't sync to the cloud or anything like that. All right, so that's kind of how core data works fundamentally, but there are certain building blocks to the core data stack in an application that we need to understand. And the first being the NS persistent container. Now, what is the NS persistent container? Well, the NS persistent container is newer than core data itself, because core data was introduced all the way back in 2005 with Mac OS X Tiger, whereas NS persistent container was introduced as part of core data in Mac OS 10.12. So much later on, but pretty much the NS persistent container is a newer way for you to be able to manage and create your managed model, so your managed object model, your managed object context, and your persistent stores. It also allows you to load your persistent stores much easier than previously than you would previously be able to. Because in previous versions of core data, before macOS 10.12, you would have to load, create, and manage your core data stack manually, which was a bit of a pain in the rear, to be frank, but now with NS Persistent Container, it's slightly easier. All right, so now that we know what an NS Persistent Container is, what is an NS Managed Object Context? Well, the NS Managed Object Context is a way for your app to communicate between your app's code and the persistent store. The managed object context is contained within the persistent container because the persistent container creates and manages that context. But if you want to, say, create new objects and store them in your database, the managed object context is what handles that. Updating objects, it handles that. Saving data, it handles that. Deleting data, it handles that. So the context is what manages saving unsaved changes and keeping track of those unsaved changes. But that's not all it does. It also supports being able to undo and redo changes that were previously made, and all that sort of stuff. So the managed object context is very powerful and very necessary to the configuration of your core data stack. But really, that is about all we need to understand about the fundamentals of core data. In another video, we'll take a look at how we can create our models, our data models, for core data. That way, it knows what kind of data to put in our on-device database or in-memory database or whatever the case might be. So thank you all so very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.